I used to ask him, what if questions. He always rolled his eyes, said I was too much, too childish, too dreamy, too needy. So I packed my things, left without a fight, and said nothing. 2 weeks later, I woke up to 52 missed calls, and a voicemail that made me sit down, rewind, and question everything I thought I knew about us. I left right after breakfast. He was in the shower. I packed what I could carry, just the basics. Clothes, my journals, a few books, my charger. I didn't even bother with the rest. If he wanted to throw out the candles I picked or keep the coffee mugs we got on that trip to Portland, fine. Let him have it. He didn't notice I took my keys off the ring. Or maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, he didn't call. The part people don't get is that it didn't happen in one big explosion. There was no cheating, no screaming match, no final betrayal. That would have made it easier. This was slower. Like watching someone stop watering a plant and acting surprised when it withers. When I met Reese, I thought he was quiet because he was deep. You know what I mean? That kind of quiet that makes you lean in a little. Makes you want to understand them. He'd nod while I talked, smile at the right moments, say just enough to feel meaningful. I thought he was thoughtful. I thought he was calm. What I didn't realize was that he was detached. And eventually, I started taking it personally. I used to ask him things like, what if we got married one day? Or can you imagine having twins? Or what if everything went wrong and we still chose each other? All those dream questions, things I asked because I loved imagining a future with him. Every single time, he'd roll his eyes. You're too much, he'd say. You live in a fantasy world. Sometimes he'd say I was being dramatic. Sometimes he'd just say nothing at all, just stare at his phone or mutter, Jesus, not this again. And I'd laugh it off, pretend I was kidding, tell myself he just didn't like pressure, that I needed to chill, that maybe I was a little needy. He never yelled, never stormed off, just gave me these long, flat silences whenever I brought up anything emotional. If I said, hey, I'm feeling disconnected, he'd say, that's not my fault. If I told him I felt sad, he'd shrug and say, well, what do you want me to do about it? After a while, I stopped saying how I felt altogether. He said I was always making things heavier than they are. I started internalizing it. I began thinking there was something broken in me, something too sensitive, too intense. Like I was a storm that kept ruining his perfect weather. But here's the truth, I wasn't too much. He was just emotionally lazy. It's weird how you can live with someone and feel lonelier than when you're single. He'd come home, nod in my direction, scroll on his phone for 2 hours, then fall asleep before I'd even finished brushing my teeth. Some nights he'd turn away from me in bed so hard it felt like a rejection. I remember one night I cried, like really cried, quiet and into my pillow, because I felt so alone. He didn't even notice. Or maybe he did and didn't ask. I honestly don't know which is worse. I stopped asking for affection, stopped reaching for his hand, stopped initiating sex because the last time I did, he said, I'm just not in the mood for a performance. That one stuck. It wasn't all bad, of course. If it was, I wouldn't have stayed so long. We had our moments. Sunday mornings where he'd make pancakes and hum something off-key. Nights when he'd rub my back while I fell asleep. But even those moments started to feel like crumbs. Little glimpses of someone who used to be warm but didn't want to be touched anymore. The last fight we had wasn't really a fight. I said I felt like he didn't see me anymore. He said I was being intense. I said, do you even want to be with me? He shrugged, that was it. Not a no, not a yes, just a shrug. I nodded. Okay. He walked away like I'd asked about the weather. And the next morning, while he was in the shower, I left. I didn't leave a note. What was I going to say? Sorry for being too much. Thanks for making me question my own worth for 2 years? No. I took my keys off the hook, zipped my duffel bag, and walked out. I texted Jordan when I got to my new place, a small sublet with peeling paint and one working stove burner. She showed up with coffee, a bag of bagels, and that look only your best friend can give you. That mix of finally and are you okay? I didn't cry the first day or the second. That scared me honestly. I thought I'd feel broken, but I mostly just felt empty, like I'd been running on fumes and finally coasted to a stop. Reese didn't text, didn't call, nothing, which told me everything I needed to know. If someone can lose you and not even ask why, they never really saw you in the first place. People talk about breakups like they're loud, like they're shouting and slamming doors and throwing plates. But sometimes, it's just a quiet decision made after 1,000 small rejections. Sometimes it's a woman standing in her own kitchen, drinking cold coffee, and realizing she hasn't been loved in a very long time. I used to think I was too much. Now I realize I just asked the wrong person to meet me halfway. I wish I could tell you there was one big moment where everything fell apart, some scandal, some final straw, but there wasn't. That's not how it went down. Our relationship didn't explode. It leaked. Little pieces of me started disappearing, one ignored conversation at a time. One eye roll, one sigh, one casual dismissal. And yeah, in the beginning, he wasn't like that. When I met Reese, he was attentive. Quiet, yes, kind of reserved, but it felt intentional, like he was someone who only spoke when it mattered. He used to look at me like I was interesting. Not just attractive, interesting. Like he couldn't wait to hear what I'd say next. It's wild how fast that kind of attention becomes a ghost. At first, I thought we were just settling in. That maybe the spark we had in the beginning was supposed to fade a little. That maybe I was the problem, maybe I was being too romantic, too extra about things. But it didn't fade, it calcified. He stopped asking questions, stopped following up. I'd talk about my day and he'd nod, then pull out his phone mid-sentence. I'd ask how his day was and he'd say, same, every time. That became his answer for everything. What's wrong? Same. Are we okay? Same. It wasn't even that we fought a lot. We didn't. And that was part of the problem. You can fight with someone who's engaged, someone who still wants something from you. But with Reese, it was like trying to argue with a locked door. He didn't yell, he just shut down. He'd say I was being emotional, and then he'd check out of the conversation completely. I remember one night, I tried to talk to him about feeling ignored. I said, "It's like you don't even notice when I'm upset." He shrugged and said, "You are always upset, though." That hit harder than any yelling ever could. After that, I started shrinking. I pulled back. I told myself to be easier, lighter, less reactive, less of a burden. I didn't want to be the girl who made everything heavy, so I adjusted. I stopped bringing up anything that mattered. I filtered every feeling through this internal calculator, trying to figure out how much was too much. I let stuff go that shouldn't have been let go, like when he forgot my birthday dinner until 9 p.m. and said, "You know I'm bad at dates." Or when he told me he didn't want to come to my friend's wedding because those things are exhausting. I kept making excuses for him, told myself he was just wired differently. That maybe he just didn't know how to express himself. Looking back, he knew how. He just didn't want to. I remember one time I was crying on the couch, full on, ugly crying after a rough day at work, and I told him I didn't feel like myself anymore, that I felt invisible. He walked into the kitchen, came back with a tissue, handed it to me, and said, "You should really talk to someone about that." Like I was a problem to outsource. It wasn't just the emotional stuff either. It bled into everything. We stopped doing the little things, cooking together, planning trips, even watching shows. Every attempt I made to reconnect was met with a wall. I'd ask, "Want to watch a movie later?" He'd say, "I'm tired." I'd suggest going out. He'd say, "You always want to do stuff." I started keeping score, which I hated. I'd count the number of times I reached out first, the number of times he turned away, the number of times I swallowed a need just to keep the peace. It wasn't healthy, but it was the only way I could measure what I was losing. Spoiler. It was me. I lost so much of myself in that relationship, and not because he demanded it, because he dismissed it. Slowly, casually, like my feelings were flies he could swat away. Jordan saw it before I did. She never said, "Leave him." That's not her style. But she started giving me looks. Started asking questions like, "When's the last time he made you feel good?" Or, "Do you feel more like yourself when you're with him or when you're alone?" I hated those questions, because I knew the answers. But I wasn't ready to do anything about it. Not yet. The unraveling kept going, week by week, month by month. I started walking on eggshells around someone who didn't even notice. There was one night, and I'll never forget this, where I stood in the kitchen staring at the cabinet and thought, if I just disappeared tomorrow, would he even notice? Would anything in his day change? That was when it hit me. Not as a dramatic realization, just a quiet truth. I wasn't really in a relationship anymore. I was in a situation, a placeholder, a background character in someone else's life, so I started planning my exit. Not in a movie scene kind of way. There was no grand escape. I just started waking up. I got a folder and labeled it Future. Started keeping notes about places I could afford. Checked listings during lunch breaks. Started separating my finances. Slowly, quietly, Reese didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He thought silence meant satisfaction. And maybe that's what makes people like him feel safe, not love, not connection, but the absence of anyone needing anything from them. The day I left was quiet too. But the days leading up to it, they were full of decisions. Micro movements toward freedom, tiny shifts back toward myself. Leaving didn't feel brave. It felt overdue. I remember standing in the bathroom the night before, brushing my teeth while he scrolled on his phone, and thinking, this is the last time I'll do this next to you. And even then, he didn't look up. When I left, I didn't tell him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a conversation. I didn't wait for him to ask me to stay. I just walked out of the life he didn't even realize I'd stopped trying to be part of. It was a Wednesday. He left for work like usual. Same routine, didn't say goodbye, didn't ask how I was doing, just grabbed his keys and mumbled something about a late meeting. I nodded. Okay, see you later. Of decisions, micro movements toward freedom. Tiny shifts back toward myself. Leaving didn't feel brave. It felt overdue. I remember standing in the bathroom the night before, brushing my teeth while he scrolled on his phone, and thinking, this is the last time I'll do this next to you. And even then, he didn't look up. When I left, I didn't tell him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a conversation. I didn't wait for him to ask me to stay. I just walked out of the life he didn't even realize I'd stopped trying to be part of. It was a Wednesday. He left for work like usual. Same routine, didn't say goodbye, didn't ask how I was doing, just grabbed his keys and mumbled something about a late meeting. I nodded, okay, see you later. That was the last thing I ever said to him in person. As soon as the door clicked shut, I moved. Fast, not because I was scared he'd come back, he wouldn't, but because I didn't want to second-guess myself. I already had everything packed. Took me less than 20 minutes to load it into my car. 2 suitcases, a few boxes, my laptop, the essentials, no photos, no keepsakes, nothing sentimental. That stuff stopped feeling like mine a long time ago. I left the bed unmade. The way he always did. Left the bathroom light on. Left the dish he'd used for breakfast in the sink. It felt symbolic, in a way. Like I was handing him back the version of our life he insisted was fine. You want to live like this? Here, all yours. I didn't leave a note. Not because I wanted to be mysterious. Because there was nothing left to say. If I'd tried to explain, he'd just roll his eyes. Again, dismiss it. Again, make me feel like I was blowing things out of proportion. Again, he didn't earn an exit interview. I had the new apartment key in my pocket. Jordan had helped me sign the lease a week earlier. Tiny studio, cracked paint, smelled like dust and old pizza. But it was mine, and it was quiet. Not the kind of silence that hurts, the kind that gives you breathing room. I texted her when I got there. Out, safe. She responded within seconds. Proud of you. Be there in an hour with coffee and overpriced muffins. True to her word, she showed up like some kind of breakup doula. No pity, no dramatics. Just good coffee and her loud presence, sitting on the floor with me, talking about nothing important. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. She'd been watching me dim for years. I'm guessing he hasn't noticed yet, she said, tearing into a blueberry muffin. Nope. We both knew how this would go. At some point he'd realize, probably not immediately, maybe not even that day. But it would hit him slowly, like everything else. And I wouldn't be there to hold his hand through it. For the first 2 days, I kept waiting for my phone to buzz. A call, a text, a where are you? Nothing, just total silence. I thought I'd feel sad, but I felt nothing, just tired. On day 3, I went back to the old apartment to grab one last box I couldn't fit in my first trip. It was the middle of the day, and I knew he wouldn't be home. When I opened the door, everything was exactly the same, except it wasn't. It smelled like him, that mix of cologne and stale laundry. The couch had his jacket draped over it. His shoes were by the door, still untied. The whole place looked paused. frozen, but not in a nostalgic way, in a way that made me realize how little life had been happening there. I grabbed the box. On the way out, I looked at the hallway mirror, the one I used to check my makeup in every morning. I looked different, not just tired, calmer, more like myself than I'd felt in years. That was the moment I knew I'd done the right thing. Still, the first week in the new place was weird. I kept catching myself reaching for a second coffee mug, reaching for someone who wasn't there. I'd make dinner and instinctively portion it for two. Then I'd remember. He was never really with me, not in the ways that counted. He was just around, and there's a difference. One night I found an old text he'd sent me back when we first started dating. It said, "You make everything feel bigger, in a good way." I almost laughed. Because that version of him, the guy who said that, evaporated about a year in. Replaced by the guy who said I was too much. Who told me to tone it down. Who acted like being excited about life was some kind of personal offense. You know what's messed up? I started believing him. Started thinking my personality was too loud. That wanting connection made me clingy. That dreaming about the future was childish. That asking for effort meant I was needy. I bent so far trying to be reasonable that I snapped. So no, I didn't tell him I was leaving. I didn't ask for closure. Because I realized I'd been waiting for him to close the gap for years. And all he did was stand there and tell me I was the problem. Letting go wasn't loud. It wasn't a movie moment. It was just a quiet morning, a zipped suitcase, a locked door behind me. He didn't call that day or the next. When people say, trust your gut, this is what they mean. Not some lightning bolt moment. Just the calm you feel when you finally stop justifying someone else's emotional laziness. The silence after leaving wasn't what I expected. I thought it would feel like freedom, like this huge weight off my chest. I imagined stretching out in bed and finally breathing again. But that's not what happened. What happened was nothing, no calls, no texts, no knock on the door, just stillness. And in that stillness, my brain started doing the thing it always does, rewinding. I'd be brushing my teeth and suddenly remember a random Tuesday where he made me breakfast without being asked. Or that night we sat on the floor, splitting a cheap bottle of wine and laughing about how bad the movie was. My mind didn't pull up the painful stuff first. It gave me the highlights. The fake trailer, the greatest hits. And that's the most dangerous part of leaving someone who wasn't outright cruel. The nostalgia sneaks in like it's doing you a favor. I'd catch myself thinking, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I could have just tried harder. That's what being gaslit for years will do to you. It makes you question your own memory. Jordan called it emotional muscle memory. She said it takes time for your body to catch up with your decision. It's like quitting sugar, she said. At first you miss it, then you remember how sick it made you. She was right, I just wasn't there yet. My new place was tiny. I could hear the guy upstairs practicing guitar badly and the couple next door who clearly hated each other. The fridge made a weird clicking sound every 3 minutes, but at least it was mine. I started trying to rebuild my routines, wake up, coffee, go for a walk, work, make dinner. Read something that wasn't about self-help or fixing men who don't want to be fixed. Some nights I'd scroll through old photos. Not because I missed him, exactly, but because I missed who I was trying to be when I was with him. The version of me who still believed he'd come around, who still had hope. That girl tried so hard. She thought if she just loved him right, he'd learn how to love her back. I wish I could go back and hug her. Tell her she didn't fail. She just invested in a man who had nothing to give. One night I made the mistake of checking his Instagram. Still there. Same smile. Same laid-back guy aesthetic. Photos from work, some dumb meme in his story, a shot of his dinner like he was trying to prove he was doing just fine. He hadn't posted about me in over a year. But I was still weirdly hoping for something, a sign he noticed I was gone. A crack in the image, anything, nothing. It made me mad, but more than that, it made me tired. I closed the app, turned off my phone, and just sat there. No music, no noise. Just me in the quiet, wondering why I ever tried to be less for someone who couldn't even meet me halfway. The worst part of emotional neglect is that you don't notice it at first. It's not a slap in the face, it's a slow erasure. You go from feeling adored to feeling tolerated, from being seen to being inconvenient. I spent months second-guessing every feeling I had because he always made me feel like my emotions were some kind of flaw. I'd say, "I feel hurt," and he'd respond, "That's not my fault." I'd ask, "Can we talk about this?" And he'd say, "Why do you always need to talk about everything?" He didn't want a partner. He wanted a mirror, someone to reflect him back to himself, tell him he was good, say nothing when he fell short. And for a while, I played that role. I don't blame myself for that. I was trying to make it work. I believed in potential. But now I know better. Now I know love isn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells in your own home. Jordan came by again a few days after I moved in. She brought over some towels because she said the ones I had were offensively thin. We sat on the floor again because I still didn't have a couch, and she asked me, "So, how are you?" No bullshit. I paused. "I don't know," I said. "I feel like I'm supposed to be happier, but mostly I just feel blank." "That's not nothing," she said. "Blank means you're not in pain anymore. It just hasn't been replaced with anything good yet." I nodded, that made sense. Then she added, "But you also need to stop romanticizing a man who couldn't even hug you without making you feel like you were asking for too much." Oof, direct hit, she wasn't wrong. I still had that voice in my head, his voice, telling me I was too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. And even though I'd left him, that voice was still narrating my memories. Like I couldn't even trust myself to remember things clearly without filtering them through his version of events. That's what emotional gaslighting does. It doesn't erase your memories, it just rearranges them. Makes you question the moments that hurt, makes you doubt your own perception. But every day, that voice got a little quieter. I started talking back to it. No, I wasn't asking for too much, I was asking for respect. No, I wasn't overly sensitive, I was reacting to being ignored. No, I wasn't needy, I just wanted basic emotional safety. The more I said it, the more it stuck. The echo chamber started to crack. And little by little, I started hearing myself again. I hadn't heard from anyone connected to him since I left. Not his friends, not his coworkers. Definitely not his family. So when I saw a text from his mom, Celia, my stomach dropped. All it said was, "You should check on him," no punctuation, no context, nothing else, just those 6 words. It felt like she dropped a grenade into my phone and walked away. Celia was complicated, cold, honestly. One of those women who mastered the art of making you feel beneath her without ever raising her voice. She never liked me, and I knew it. She never said it outright, but the way she'd purse her lips when I laughed too loud, or change the subject when I mentioned my job, or call Reese her baby, like I was some outsider trying to take something from her, it was enough. We were polite, sure. I played nice. I always brought wine to family dinners, offered to help with dishes, asked about her migraines and her garden and whatever book club she pretended to enjoy. But there was tension from the start. She thought I was too much, too. Not in those exact words, she was too measured for that, but in her way. Subtle digs, passive comments, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And now, after weeks of silence, she reaches out. Not "How are you?" Not "I'm sorry things ended the way they did." Not even a simple "Can we talk?" Just "You should check on him." I stared at it for a while. Then I sent a screenshot to Jordan. Her reply came in seconds. LOL. Of course this woman thinks his well-being is still your job. Then another one, block her. I didn't block her, but I didn't respond either, because what was I supposed to say? Thanks for the heads up, I'll go clean up the mess your emotionally stunted son made of himself. Nope. I put my phone down and didn't look at it again for the rest of the day. But I'll be honest, the message got under my skin. Not because I felt guilty, but because it was so on brand for Celia to wait until something went sideways, then throw it at me like I still owed someone an explanation. Like I was the emotional babysitter just because I used to love him. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Celia never liked when I challenged Reese. Never liked when I said anything too emotional in front of her. Once, at dinner, I mentioned we were having communication issues, and she said, "I kid you not, some men just don't talk much. That doesn't mean they don't love you." I remember laughing awkwardly, trying to brush it off. She just kept cutting her steak and said, "If you stop expecting so much, you won't be disappointed so often." Like it was my fault, always my fault. And I know for a fact she never held Reese accountable for anything. If he forgot my birthday, she'd say, he's just distracted, work's been stressful. If he snapped at me in front of her, she'd pretend not to hear it. Once I left, I assumed that door had closed. I didn't expect her to reach out. And I definitely didn't expect her to drop a cryptic message like she was casting a spell. That night, I laid in bed and couldn't sleep. Not because I missed him, I didn't, but because now I was stuck with this question: what happened to him? Was he okay? Was he spiraling? Was she just trying to manipulate me into caring again? I thought about that text a lot over the next couple of days. I didn't respond, but I watched my phone a little more than usual, kept expecting it to light up with his name. It didn't. And honestly, that told me just as much as a message would have. Because if something had happened to him, something serious, wouldn't someone else have reached out? A friend? A coworker? His sister? But no. Just Celia, dropping a vague line like I was supposed to come running. Jordan came over 2 days later and found me rereading the text like I was trying to solve a riddle. She sat down, took one look at my face, and said, "Nope. Whatever you're thinking, stop. He's not your responsibility anymore." I handed her my phone. She read the message and let out a long sigh. "You know what this is," she said. "This is her realizing that the only person who ever managed his emotions was you. And now that you're gone, she's stuck with the version of her son she refused to see." That hit because, yeah, maybe that was it. Maybe she was finally seeing the full picture. The Reese I tried to talk to, the one who wouldn't talk back, the one who shut down, disappeared emotionally, and left you to figure it out on your own. Maybe she thought I was the glue holding it together. And now that I was gone, things were falling apart. But here's the thing, that's not my fault. I tried. I gave years of my life trying. I did the emotional labor. I filled in the blanks. I excused the silences. I smoothed things over. I carried the weight. And eventually I realized he was never going to meet me there. So no, I wasn't going to be guilted back into his story. Not by his mom, not by a text. Not by whatever mess he was dealing with now. Because I already lived in that mess. And I chose to leave it. I woke up on a Monday to find my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 52 missed calls, all from him. No other notifications. No texts from friends. No social alerts. Just him blowing up my phone like I'd disappeared off the planet. And I know what you're thinking, why didn't you block him? Because I wanted to see when it happened. I wanted the proof. The moment the silence cracked. I'd been gone for almost 3 weeks by then. 3 weeks of nothing. No messages, no questions. No, why did you leave? Or where are you? Not even a did you take the second set of keys. Just radio silence. Until now. Until 52 missed calls. It started around 1 o'clock a.m. The first few were spaced out. One at 1:04, one at 1:17, another at 1:32. Then they got closer. More frequent, more desperate, like he was spiraling and didn't know where else to go with it. No voicemails, no texts, just call after call. I didn't call back. I didn't even open the call log for a few minutes. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, wondering what kind of storm had finally hit him hard enough to remember I existed. Eventually, I scrolled through it. It was like watching a pattern. He'd wait 10 minutes, then call. 5 minutes, call, 2 minutes, call. At some point, I guess he just kept hitting redial. I put my phone down. I knew what was coming next, the apology, the breakdown, I just need to explain. But I also knew it wasn't about me. It never was. This wasn't I miss you. It was I'm falling apart, and I need someone to save me. And I wasn't that person anymore. An hour later, the voicemail came through. One single message. I waited. I didn't play it right away. I made coffee, fed myself, did everything I could to keep my hands off my phone. I even texted Jordan a screenshot of the missed calls. Her reply: "Let him drown in his own silence. You threw him a life jacket for years. He tossed it back every time." Accurate. Still, when I finally sat down and hit play, it didn't hit how I expected it to. His voice was shaky, tired, like he hadn't slept. "Hey, it's me." No shit, I thought. He paused for a few seconds, long enough that I thought the message had ended. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I get that. I do." Another pause. "I'm not okay." Something about the way he said that made me pause. Not because I felt bad, just because it didn't sound like a lie. For once, it didn't sound rehearsed. I tried to keep it together, but I guess I didn't know how to do that without you. There it was. Not I miss you. Not I'm sorry for everything I put you through. Just I don't know how to function now that you're not carrying it all for me. He kept talking. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. About why I am the way I am. It's not an excuse, but I thought if I ignored it long enough, it wouldn't matter. His voice broke on the next line, barely. I ended up in the hospital last night. Panic attack, I think, or whatever. They kept me overnight, said I collapsed. I sat up, was that real or drama? But then he added, I'm not saying this to get you back. I know I lost you. I wanted you to know I'm trying. Finally. Another long silence. Then, there's a letter. It's in the drawer you always asked about. I didn't want you to find it, but now, maybe it's better if you do. Click, that was it. I played it twice, then again. Not because I was planning to reply, I wasn't, but because I needed to sit with it, process it. Make sure I wasn't romanticizing it just because he finally said something real. Here's what I realized. It didn't matter how raw his voice was, or how many calls he made, or what kind of breakdown he was having now, because I already lived through the part where he didn't care, where he watched me cry and shrugged, where he rolled his eyes at my needs, where he told me over and over that I was too much. That voicemail wasn't for me. It was him trying to make peace with his own guilt, trying to say, I see it now, without saying, I destroyed you while you were trying to build something with me. And I wasn't going to be the cleanup crew just because he was finally standing in the wreckage. Jordan called me that night. You listened to it, she asked. Yeah. And he's unraveling. Let him. I didn't delete the voicemail. I also didn't save it. I just left it there, floating in my inbox like a reminder. He was finally feeling everything I'd been feeling for years. And now, I didn't feel a thing. I listened to it again the next morning, not because I was tempted to respond, but because I couldn't shake the tone in his voice. Something about the way he said, there's a letter had lodged itself in my brain and wouldn't let go. He sounded different. Not sorry, not begging, just hollow, like someone who had been sleepwalking through life and finally woke up in the middle of a fire. And I guess part of me wanted to know, was this real? Or just another performance now that I'd finally pulled away? Because, let's be honest, Reese had never been great at emotional follow-through. He could say the words, the ones that sounded like accountability, but he never stayed in it. He'd apologize, sort of, and then get annoyed when I didn't bounce back fast enough. So I didn't trust words from him. I trusted behavior. And behavior-wise, he waited until I was completely out of his life before he realized he couldn't function without me holding everything together. Too little, too late. Still, the voicemail stuck with me, especially the part where he said, I'm not saying this to get you back. That almost pissed me off. Because even now, even in the middle of what was clearly a full-on meltdown, he still felt the need to preemptively manage my expectations, as if I was sitting there dreaming of some dramatic reconciliation when I'd already rebuilt my life without him. It was such a Reese thing to do. Reveal half a truth, drop a few heavy lines, and then make it sound like he was doing me a favor by admitting he was in pain. But that last line, there's a letter, it's in the drawer you always asked about. That got me, because I did ask about that drawer more than once. It was this small, locked side drawer in his desk. I joked about it in the beginning, called it his deep dark secrets folder. He always brushed me off, said it was just old stuff or not important. He'd change the subject, or act like I was being invasive, even though I wasn't pushing. I just thought it was strange that he kept it locked when he didn't lock anything else. Eventually, I stopped asking. Like I stopped asking about a lot of things. But now it was suddenly back on the table. The same drawer that was off limits for years had apparently been hiding a letter meant for me this whole time. Of course it had. Reese was the kind of person who couldn't speak in real time. He needed distance. He needed the security of silence before he could say anything that resembled truth. He couldn't handle the reaction, the vulnerability, the mess. So he wrote it down, locked it away, and waited until I was long gone and he had no other option before pointing me toward it like it was buried treasure. And I won't lie, part of me did want to read it. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I wanted to know what version of himself he'd hidden from me. What story he'd told no one, maybe not even himself, Until now, I didn't go right away. I waited 2 more days. I needed to sit with the feeling, make sure I wasn't doing it for him. I had no interest in a reunion, no fantasy of some tearful, redemptive closure. I just wanted to know if I'd spent 4 years trying to reach someone who was never going to meet me there, or if he had something deeper he was too scared to show me until it was too late. So on Thursday afternoon, I drove back to the apartment. It still smelled like him, not in a good way, in a weird, stale cologne and laundry detergent way, the kind of smell that sticks when you never open a window. Same furniture, same arrangement, like nothing had changed. Except me, I knew where the key was. He used to keep it taped under the drawer, told me once it was for convenience in case he forgot the combo. I'd found it months ago, but I never used it. Now I did. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside, a white envelope with my name written on it in small, slanted handwriting. No date, no decoration, just, "For you." Next to it, a couple of old photos, us, from the early days. One of me wearing his hoodie, sitting on the kitchen counter, laughing at something he said. He used to love that picture. I took the envelope, sat down on the couch, and opened it. And for the first time since I left, I felt a real shift. Not hope, not sadness, just clarity, because this letter, it wasn't a manipulation. It wasn't a love bomb. It was a confession. I didn't plan on seeing anyone. I only went back to Reese's office to drop off a few things he'd left at my place. Old mail, some work crap, a charger, a couple of random books I'd found under the bed. Stuff that didn't belong in my new life. I could have mailed it. I should have. But I didn't. Part of me wanted to see the space again. Not him. Just the environment he thrived in, the place where he always seemed more alive than he ever did at home. He was never more on than he was at work. Charming, sharp, collected. Everyone there thought he was brilliant. Funny, even. I used to believe that version of him too. The office hadn't changed. Same clean layout, same neutral colors, same fake plants and motivational posters. I walked through the lobby with a manila envelope in my hands and a knot in my stomach. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I figured I'd leave it at reception and get out. That was the plan. But plans, as we know, don't mean much when someone else is already living the fallout. I was halfway across the floor when I saw her. Lara. She was standing by the copy machine, looking like she hadn't slept in a few days. Still dressed sharp but off, not in the makeup, in the energy, like something was sitting on her chest she didn't know how to get rid of. She saw me, blinked like she wasn't sure if I was real, then walked over. "Hey," she said, quiet but not cold. "Hi," I replied, holding up the envelope, "just dropping this off." She nodded. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to my face. I could feel something in her. Hesitation, guilt, I couldn't tell. "He's not here," she said after a beat. "I figured," I said. "I didn't come to see him." Lara glanced around, lowered her voice. "You haven't heard." My stomach tightened. Heard what? She looked genuinely uncomfortable now, like she was debating if it was even her place to say anything. I wasn't going to push, but I also didn't move. I just stood there, waiting. "He hasn't been back in over a week," she finally said. "Word is something happened, personal." I raised an eyebrow. Like what? No one saying much, just that he left suddenly. Management's tight-lipped. But I saw him the day before he vanished. He didn't look right. Not right how? Wired, tense, like he was trying not to fall apart. She hesitated. He left a meeting halfway through, just walked out. Didn't say anything. I blinked. He ever done that before? She shook her head. Never. Something about the way she said it made it feel heavier than just workplace gossip. "You two were close, right?" she asked carefully. I paused. "We lived together for years." Lara nodded, eyes dropping. "Right, of course, sorry, I thought you might already know." I didn't know anything beyond the voicemail. And apparently, there was more unraveling than I thought. I set the envelope down on a desk near reception. Lara followed me a few steps. "Sorry if I'm overstepping," she said, "but if you do talk to him, he's not okay." That stuck with me, because this wasn't someone who was trying to meddle. She didn't sound invested in the drama. She sounded worried. And if Reese had her concerned, someone who only ever saw his filtered, polished side, then something had seriously cracked open. I nodded once, thanks. She gave me a small, awkward smile, then walked back to the copy machine like nothing happened. But something had. As soon as I stepped outside, I texted Jordan. Saw Lara. He hasn't been to work in over a week. She called me immediately. You okay? Yeah, I said, watching people walk by on the sidewalk like it was any normal Tuesday. Just weird hearing it from someone else. The collapse. Like I wasn't crazy after all. You weren't. I know, but still. There's something strange about being validated after the damage is done. Like your pain finally gets taken seriously, but only because it's leaking into someone else's life now. I hung up, got in my car, and sat in the driver's seat for a while before starting the engine. Reese hadn't just spiraled. He disappeared. From his own job. From the one place he always seemed in control. And even though I wasn't part of that world anymore, people were starting to feel the holes he left behind. It made me think about all the times I tried to warn him. All the times I said, you need to talk to someone. All the times he shrugged and said, I'm fine. Now he was out of sight. Unreachable. And whatever was going on, I was no longer the person pulling him back from the edge. I didn't want to be, but still. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at the cursor blinking in an empty document. Then I typed, he was always falling apart. He just knew how to fall quietly. I didn't know what I was writing it for. Maybe just for me. Maybe because I needed to say it out loud in some way. Because watching someone unravel when you're no longer the one holding the net is surreal, and watching the people around him finally notice, that was a kind of closure I never saw coming. I didn't go back for him. I went back for the letter. The one he mentioned in the voicemail, the drawer I'd joked about 100 times, the one he always brushed off with, just old stuff or nothing important. Except now, it apparently mattered. It had been 3 days since I saw Lara, 4 since the voicemail. And even though I kept telling myself I didn't care, the curiosity had grown too loud to ignore. Not because I wanted closure. I already had that. But because I wanted to know the version of Reese he never let me see. The drawer had always been a symbol, in a way. A metaphor for every conversation he wouldn't have, every door he kept closed, every part of himself he labeled off-limits, then blamed me for trying to open. Now he was the one pointing me toward it. So I went. The apartment was still in his name, but the landlord had never taken me off the lease. I still had a key. I hadn't used it since I left, but it was always in the back of the drawer where I keep the batteries and takeout menus. I drove over mid-afternoon. I knew he wouldn't be there. I didn't even check. The second I stepped inside, I was hit with that smell again, stale laundry and loneliness. Like the place had stopped being lived in and just started being sat in. Same couch. Same coffee table. Same stack of unopened mail near the door. It was like time froze the second I walked out. I didn't linger. I went straight to the hallway to the desk against the wall. Second drawer from the top, right side, still locked. I checked underneath, and just like he said all those months ago, the key was taped there, sloppy, half hanging off. I pulled it free, slid it into the lock, and turned. Click. It opened smoother than I expected, like it had been waiting. Inside was a single white envelope, my name on the front in his handwriting. Slanted, rushed, slightly uneven, like he wrote it in one sitting and never went back. Next to it were a few photos. Us mostly, early days. Smiling, tangled up on the couch. Me in his hoodie. Him looking at me like he still saw something worth holding on to. I picked up the letter and sat on the edge of the couch. The one we used to share. The one where I cried beside him and he said nothing. I stared at the envelope for a minute, then I opened it. No date, no dear, just words. Messy, honest, kind of scattered, like a brain dump from someone who finally realized silence wasn't strength. I don't know how to start this. I've rewritten the first line 4 times and nothing sounds right. You always wanted to understand me, and I never made it easy. I think that was intentional. There's stuff I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't trust what would happen if I let you really see me. If I let anyone see me. When I was 15, my dad left. Like literally walked out in the middle of the night. No fight. No warning, just gone. My mom acted like everything was fine, like nothing happened. She just got up the next day and made breakfast. I asked if he was coming back and she said, "Don't make this dramatic." that was the end of the conversation. That was the first time I learned to shut up. Over the years, I trained myself not to feel things too loudly, not to ask questions, not to make a scene. I thought if I could stay quiet enough, I'd be safe. That people only leave when you need too much from them. Then I met you, and you asked all the questions. You wanted the mess. You leaned in when I pulled away. You kept trying to reach the part of me I'd boarded up, and instead of being grateful, I punished you for it. I told you that you were too much because I was too afraid. I made your love feel like a burden. I made your kindness feel like pressure. I made you think that wanting to be close was a flaw. And by the time I realized what I'd done, you were already packing your things. I don't blame you. You were right to leave. I just hope someday you know you didn't imagine it. You weren't crazy. You were just trying to love someone who didn't know how to let you. That was it. No dramatic ending. No please come back. No sign-off. Just a plain letter from a man who finally took the time to say something real after it was too late. And honestly, I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt calm because this was the first time he gave me anything without me begging for it. And it was the first time I didn't feel responsible for what came next. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and left the apartment exactly the way I found it. Except this time, I didn't look back. I read the letter 3 more times when I got home, not because I was clinging to it, not because I was having some kind of emotional breakthrough, but because I needed it to sink in. I needed to know that I hadn't imagined the distance, the withdrawal, the cold shoulder that lasted years. I needed it spelled out in his own words that what happened between us wasn't just in my head. And now, finally, I had it. The part that stuck with me, the one that kept echoing in the back of my mind, was this line. I made your love feel like a burden. I don't think I'd ever read a sentence that explained our relationship more clearly than that. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Every hug, every question, every attempt to connect, it always seemed to land wrong with him. Like I was offering too much. Asking for something he didn't have. But instead of telling me that, he just acted like I was difficult. Like my version of love was some kind of emotional tax. He never screamed. He never cursed. He never made a scene. He just slowly made me feel like I was wrong for needing anything at all. And now, sitting in my own space with his letter open on the kitchen table, I finally understood why. He was raised to survive, not to connect. He grew up with a disappearing father and a mother who denied reality. And when that's your template for love, you learn to make yourself small. You learn to stop expecting comfort. You learn that silence is safer than disappointment. I get it. I really do. But here's the thing. Understanding someone doesn't mean you owe them your peace. Because yes, he had a past. But so did I, and while he was busy locking parts of himself away, I was standing in front of him every day offering connection and getting shut out over and over again. So now, with the full story in front of me, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. Not closure, I already had that, but relief that I didn't have to carry the blame anymore. That it wasn't me. That I wasn't too much. That my version of love wasn't flawed, it was just mismatched with someone who had no idea what to do with it. I told Jordan about the letter later that night. We were on the phone. She was folding laundry. I could hear it rustling in the background. So, she said, was it what you thought it'd be? Kind of, I said. It was honest. Probably the most honest thing he's ever given me. That's not hard, she muttered. I smiled. True. What's it change? Nothing, I said, but it explains a lot. Jordan paused. And does that make you want to go back? Not even a little. That surprised her. I could hear it in the silence on the other end of the line. Wow, she said. Look at you, dodging the trauma bond comeback arc. I've evolved. Proud of you. I laughed, but deep down I was proud of me too. Because the old me, she would have read that letter and felt like she owed him something. A conversation. A second chance. A shoulder to cry on. But the version of me sitting on that couch now, she knew better. She knew that empathy isn't a reason to re-enter a relationship that drained her. She knew that just because someone explains their pain doesn't mean they're ready to heal it. And she knew that healing doesn't always come wrapped in a reunion. Sometimes it comes in the form of a letter. Late, quiet, honest, but still late. And that's okay. That's the thing about growth. It doesn't demand that you stay. It just asks that you listen, learn, and keep walking. So I kept walking. I didn't text him, I didn't call. I put the letter in a drawer, not because I needed to keep it, but because I was done holding it. Done holding him, because whatever came next for him, it wasn't my job to carry it. Not anymore. He reached out 2 days after I read the letter. Just a simple message. Would you come see me? No expectations, I just want to talk. I didn't answer right away. I sat with it for a while, reread it a few times. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to be sure I was saying it from me, not some leftover version of myself that still felt responsible for his feelings. Jordan's advice was exactly what you'd expect. If you go for you. Not him, not the fantasy, not the guilt. She wasn't wrong, so I agreed to meet him at the hospital. He didn't give me many details, just said he was discharged but still doing outpatient therapy. Panic-induced collapse, just like the voicemail said. He looked okay when I saw him, physically at least. Emotionally, different story. We met in one of those sterile, overly beige waiting rooms with chairs no one sits in for comfort. He stood when I walked in, didn't reach for a hug, didn't smile, just nodded like he knew this wasn't going to be light. Thanks for coming, he said. I sat down. You said you wanted to talk. He nodded, then exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I read the letter again before this, he said quietly. Didn't know if you'd come, figured you probably shouldn't. I didn't respond, I just watched him. He looked smaller, not physically, just less inflated. Like the version of him who used to fill every room with quiet control had finally let the air out. I've been in therapy, he said. Real therapy, not just one session and done. They're making me look at things I never wanted to say out loud. Good. He nodded like he agreed, but also like it hurt. I was awful to you, he said, not in loud ways, in slow ones. In ways I didn't even recognize at the time. That was the part I'd been waiting to hear. Not because I needed an apology, but because I needed him to say it without me having to prompt it. He kept going. I didn't know how to be present. You asked me to show up, and I acted like you were asking for too much, but really, I was terrified. Because if I showed up and it still didn't work, then I couldn't blame anyone else. And so you blamed me preemptively, I said. He winced, yeah. Silence settled between us. I didn't rush to fill it. I'd done enough of that for both of us over the years. Eventually, he said, I don't expect anything. I'm not trying to win you back. I just wanted you to see this version of me, the one that's finally trying. I believed him, and honestly, that scared me more than if he had begged. Because this was the version of him I always hoped would show up, the honest one. The emotionally available one. The man who could finally look me in the eye and not flinch, but he showed up too late, and that made all the difference. I'm glad you're doing the work, I said. Truly. He nodded. I wish I'd started it sooner. So do I said, but not for us, for you. He looked surprised by that, like he still half expected me to say, we can try again. But I wasn't going to say that, because healing doesn't mean reopening the wound. Forgiveness, if that's what this was, doesn't mean forgetting the cost. You used to say I was too much, I said. But the truth is, I was exactly the right amount for someone who wanted to meet me there. He looked down. I know that now, he said. I stood up, not to leave dramatically, just because there was nothing else to say. He looked up at me like he wanted to hold the moment a little longer. But I didn't owe him that. I'm glad you're getting better, I said. Will I ever hear from you again? I gave him the most honest answer I had. Maybe, but not the way you think. And then I left. No hug, no lingering looks, no big cinematic ending. Just a quiet exit, the way real life actually works. The first thing Jordan said when I told her I saw him, don't you *********ing dare. I hadn't even finished the story yet. I'm not going back, I said calmly. I just talked to him. She raised an eyebrow. That's how it starts. First, it's just a conversation. Then it's he's changed. Then it's, well, maybe we owe it to ourselves. I just stared at her, letting her get it out. She wasn't wrong. She sipped her wine like she was preparing to fight a ghost. Look, I get it. He cried, he's in therapy. He wrote a letter, congrats. He finally started acting like a human being. She put the glass down. But don't confuse effort with transformation. Especially when the effort only showed up after he lost you. There it was, the exact thing I hadn't wanted to say out loud but couldn't unhear in my head. Yeah, I said. That part got to me too. Jordan softened a little. So what did you actually feel? Be honest. I paused. Relief that it wasn't all in my head, that I wasn't imagining the way he shut me out. But, she asked, but it also made me sad. Not because I want him back, I really don't, but because this version of him, the one who can admit he screwed up, that's the guy I spent years waiting for. She nodded. And now that he's here, it's too late. Exactly. She leaned forward. That's the part that messes people up. When someone finally becomes who you hoped they'd be, but only once they have nothing to lose. I sat back, arms crossed. So what do you do with that? She didn't hesitate. You leave it. I looked at her. That's cold. No, that's boundaries. You think I don't have people I cared about who only figured their crap out once I stopped fixing them? I do. But you know what I learned. You can love the progress and still walk away. That hit, because even though I had no intention of rekindling anything, part of me had started to feel this weird sense of emotional responsibility again. Like just because he'd been honest, I had to show up differently too. But Jordan was right. Honesty doesn't earn you access. She kept going. You gave him years of your life. You carried both your emotional load and his. And now that he's finally holding his own stuff, he wants a gold star. I don't think he wants a gold star. He wants something, otherwise he wouldn't have asked to see you. Closure, maybe. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Closure is a solo sport. I smiled. You should write that on a t-shirt. Already did, Etsy shop pending. We both laughed, but the point landed. Reese wasn't a villain. He was just someone who never dealt with his damage until he had no choice. And yeah, that made him human. It made him real, but it didn't make him safe. I'm proud of you, she said after a pause. You didn't fold. I thought about it. I know. And the version of me from a year ago, she would have folded. Jordan raised her glass. R.I.P. to her. I clinked mine against hers. May she rest in peace. That night I sat with it, all of it, not in a sad way, in a clear way. Because Jordan was right. I wasn't just walking away from a man. I was walking away from the part of me that believed I had to earn love by understanding someone else's pain more than they understood mine. I was done playing the therapist, done playing the emotional translator, done being the one who held all the weight just so someone else could stay comfortable. Reese could be healing. That was great. But I was already healed enough to know that healing doesn't mean going backward. It means choosing peace over potential. I started therapy a week after I saw him, not because I was spiraling. I wasn't. I was actually doing okay. But I wanted to make sure I didn't just survive him, I wanted to rebuild without him echoing in my head anymore. The first session was weird. Not in a bad way, just quiet. I sat across from a woman named Danielle, soft-spoken, mid-40s, glasses on a chain. The kind of face you trust even if you don't want to. She asked why I was there, and I told her the short version. I left someone who made me feel like I was too much. Then he fell apart. And now I'm trying to make sure I don't take any of that with me. She nodded like she'd heard it before, which she probably had. Danielle asked me what I wanted long-term. I told her peace, not perfection, just the kind of life where I didn't have to shrink to be loved. We started slow, talked about my patterns, my instincts. The way I'd been conditioned to explain myself before anyone even asked. Turns out, I wasn't too emotional. I was just someone who learned to feel things deeply and was always around people who preferred to pretend nothing mattered. That realization alone was worth the copay. Outside of therapy, I started writing again. Nothing big, just little things. Notes in my phone, lines that came to me while doing dishes. A short story I'll probably never finish. But it felt good to create something that wasn't tied to pain. I wasn't writing about him. I was writing about me. I also started walking more. Long walks, no destination, no playlist, just me and my thoughts. I stopped checking his socials, stopped opening old photos, stopped looking back. One afternoon, I ran into him at the grocery store, total accident. I was in the frozen foods aisle. He turned the corner and there he was, holding a basket like a normal person. Not a ghost, not a villain, just a guy buying eggs. We both froze, he nodded, I nodded back. He stepped aside, I walked past. No words, and it didn't hurt. That was the moment I knew, the healing had stuck. The version of me who would have panicked, She was gone. The one who would have gone home and analyzed every blink, every twitch in his jaw, every non-sentence he didn't say. She didn't live here anymore. I texted Jordan after, told her what happened. Her reply, "Did you key his car?" No. Growth. It was. I saw him one more time after that. Not in a planned way, just crossing paths again. We exchanged a few words. Civil, brief, detached. And I realized something important. I could hold his truth without holding his weight. Because yeah, he had pain. He had trauma. He had a backstory that shaped him into someone emotionally unavailable. But that didn't mean I had to carry it. Understanding wasn't the same as staying. Empathy didn't mean surrender. I'd spent years trying to help him open up, thinking I could love him out of his silence. All it got me was loneliness in the same room as someone I thought loved me. Now, I was done with that kind of math. I didn't want relationships that made me feel like a puzzle someone was too tired to solve. I wanted connection that didn't require translation. So I started making space for things that made me feel like myself again. I reconnected with people I'd pulled away from, friends who used to say, "You seem off," when I was still pretending everything was fine. I cleaned my space, bought plants, started cooking again, joined a book club even though I hate group chats. I even laughed without feeling guilty about it. That was new. And you know what? It was enough, not flashy, not dramatic, just mine. No one telling me I was too much. No one making me second-guess the way I love. Just me, learning how to be full without asking anyone for permission. I used to ask him questions he hated. What if we got married? What if we had twins? What if we grew old and lost everything and still chose each other anyway? I thought those questions were about love, about building a life with someone who wanted the same things, but he saw them as pressure. A test. An emotional pop quiz he never studied for. "You're always doing this," he'd say, "always making everything into a thing." So I stopped asking. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe wanting those things, closeness, connection, consistency, was selfish. Immature, unrealistic. Maybe I was too dreamy. Maybe my version of love belonged in some book club romance novel and not real life. But here's what I finally understand. The dream was never the problem. I just gave it to someone who didn't know what to do with it. And that's on me, not in a shameful way, but in a grown, honest way. I handed something fragile to someone who never asked for it, then got mad when he didn't hold it the right way. It wasn't fair to either of us. I wanted to build a house. He wanted to rent a room. I wanted to be seen. He wanted to be left alone. I wanted us. He wanted space. And for a long time, I made myself small to fit inside his comfort zone, not because I lacked self-worth, but because I believed we were just mismatched in timing, not in values. I thought he just needed patience. What he really needed was someone who asked less, needed less, expected less. That wasn't me. And thank God it isn't. Because I like dreaming, I like imagining futures, I like asking big questions at inappropriate times. I like love that feels deep and messy and alive. There's nothing childish about that. It's not needy. It's not naive. It's human. We all want to be chosen. I just stopped begging for it from someone who made me feel foolish for wanting to be picked every day, not just at the beginning. When I told Jordan that, she just nodded and said, "So, you finally forgave yourself." I think I did, not for loving him, but for loving past the point where I should have let go, for bending instead of walking, for confusing effort with impact, and for thinking I had to make myself easier to love when I was already enough. Now, I still dream, but differently. My dreams have boundaries now. They include people who show up, who listen, who match the energy, who don't need to be rescued or fixed or dragged toward intimacy like it's a punishment. I don't want someone to survive life with. I want someone to live it with. And if that means being too much again, so be it. I'd rather be too much than not enough for the wrong person. It came in late. 11:42 p.m. on a Sunday. I was already in bed, lights off, phone on Do Not Disturb. I only saw it the next morning when I checked my notifications, a single missed call and one voicemail. From him, the last one. By then, I hadn't heard from Reese in weeks. Not since we ran into each other that second time. Not since the polite, surface-level exchange that felt more like two coworkers bumping into each other than two people who used to share a bed. Part of me thought maybe that was the end, that we'd both quietly moved on and agreed, without saying it, to leave it there. But then came the voicemail. I didn't play it right away. I let it sit there. All morning, I went about my day like it wasn't waiting for me, like it didn't exist. Coffee, emails, laundry, grocery run, normal stuff, life stuff. By the time I sat down to listen, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I hit play. His voice was calmer than I expected. Hey. Pause. I know you probably didn't want to hear from me again, and that's okay. I'm not calling for anything, not asking for anything. He exhaled. It was audible, like the kind of breath you take when you've been holding something in for too long. I just wanted to say thank you. Another pause. For loving me when I didn't know how to accept it. For trying. For showing up when I kept pulling away. I didn't say it enough, or maybe at all, but I know what you gave me. And I'm sorry I didn't hold it better. There was no emotion in his voice, but it wasn't cold either, just clear. You didn't break me, you didn't fail. I made it hard to love me, and you tried anyway. I don't think I'll ever have that again. I just wanted you to know I see it now. Then quietly, take care of yourself, I hope you're happy. Click, that was it, no call me back, no miss you, no let's try again. Just thank you. I listened to it once. Then I deleted it, not in anger, not to prove a point, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need proof that he finally got it. I didn't need the acknowledgement. I didn't need to save it just in case I got weak and wanted to replay the moment he said the right things. The story was over. I'd already said everything I needed to, not to him, but to myself. I had already walked away and built a new life, one choice at a time. This wasn't some dramatic finale. There was no catharsis, no final monologue. Just a woman standing in her kitchen in the soft morning light, sipping coffee, listening to a voice she used to wait hours to hear, and realizing she didn't feel anything anymore. No regret, no what-ifs, no fantasy reunion playing in the background, just peace, because the real ending didn't happen in that voicemail. It happened the morning I left without asking for permission. It happened the day I stopped arguing with someone who never planned to understand me. It happened every time I chose stillness over chaos. That voicemail, it was just the final page, and I didn't need to reread it. So I made breakfast, opened a window, let the sunlight pour in, and I let it go for good. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.